I was halfway through resoldering a blown signal bus on automated dock line 4 when I glanced up at the high-ceiling steel rafters and saw my name misspelled for the third time that month on the corporate victory banner. Congratulations to the automation delivery team led by Vice President Bradley Thorne. The bold vinyl letters declared across a bright blue background. 2 relentless years of my life, 70-hour work weeks, burnt fingers, grease-stained denim, and dozens of nights spent sleeping on a narrow military cot inside the noisy server room, and executive management could not even spell Harlan Vance correctly on their promotional signage. That was the exact moment I realized where I stood in the corporate hierarchy. I was 48 years old, possessing a master's degree in electrical engineering and microprocessor architecture from a top-tier state university. Yet to the suit-and-tie middle managers at Apex Logistics Corp., I was merely an expensive, disposable technician hired to solve impossible engineering crises, quietly and vanish into the background the moment the ceremonial ribbons were cut. Before joining Apex Logistics Corp., I had spent over 20 years working in heavy industrial automation, designing control systems for commercial aerospace suppliers and naval defense contractors. I had built a reputation for solving intractable hardware bottlenecks that stumped conventional IT departments. My personal work ethic was heavily influenced by my late father, a master industrial machinist who spent 40 years working in Midwest manufacturing plants. My father used to tell me that whenever you build an engineering marvel that keeps a company profitable, you must ensure you retain control of the ignition key. Never allow corporate bureaucrats to claim your personal craftsmanship as their corporate property without proper compensation. Those wise words became the foundational philosophy behind my career. Operating out of a fully equipped garage workshop behind my suburban residence, I had founded Advanced Core Logic LLC 5 years prior to taking the corporate integration job. My private workshop was fitted with high-precision oscilloscopes, thermal imaging cameras, surface-mount soldering stations, and CNC milling machines. It was in that quiet garage, surrounded by motor oil, circuit boards, and technical manuals that I spent thousands of off-duty hours developing microcontroller architectures. Apex Logistics Corp. Operated a massive regional fulfillment powerhouse spanning over 120,000 square feet of temperature-controlled warehouse space. The company board had spent the previous 2 years aggressively marketing a multi-million-dollar modernization drive, promising shareholders a fully autonomous robotic sorting matrix capable of processing 30,000 packages per hour without human intervention. On paper, Vice President of Operations Bradley Thorne and Chief Technology Officer Gordon Miller were touted as the brilliant architects behind this digital revolution. In reality, neither man understood the fundamental principles of real-time industrial automation. Bradley Thorne was a career corporate climber whose primary skill was producing colorful slide decks for quarterly reviews, while Gordon Miller was a defensive executive who spent most of his day deflecting blame onto lower-level engineering staff whenever system metrics dipped. The corporate culture at Apex Logistics Corp. Was fundamentally toxic, characterized by petty office politics, credit theft, and extreme management indifference toward floor staff. Middle managers spent hours in unproductive strategy sessions arguing over buzzwords, while the break room refrigerator was routinely raided and maintenance requests were ignored for months. Prior to my arrival, Apex Logistics Corp. Had cycled through 3 separate engineering consultants, each of whom left the firm in frustration after management refused to allocate adequate capital for commercial-grade industrial infrastructure. When I accepted the position of lead systems integration architect, I inherited a crumbling technical nightmare. The company legacy software stack was a patchwork of outdated C++ routines, conflicting proprietary protocols, and unshielded copper wiring that picked up electromagnetic noise from nearby power transformers. The grand automation initiative began falling apart 18 months into development when the official vendor modules delivered by the company contracted supplier proved to be a catastrophic failure. Those commercial control units, produced by a low-bid offshore contractor, suffered from severe design flaws in their thermal dissipation layer. Under heavy operational loads, the main processing chips overheated within 20 minutes, causing severe packet loss across the industrial controller area network. When the network dropped packets, the high-speed robotic pickers lost their spatial orientation, resulting in spectacular collisions that sent $90,000 custom robotic arms smashing into structural steel columns. The warehouse floor became a chaotic battleground of crushed cardboard boxes, spilled hydraulic fluid, and flashing red warning lights, following a particularly disastrous test run where 3 consecutive sorting lanes collapsed during a quarterly executive walkthrough. Chief Technology Officer Gordon Miller summoned an emergency strategy session in the main executive boardroom. He sat at the end of a long mahogany conference table, his face flushed red and his designer dress shirt soaked with sweat, furiously demanding to know why his signature corporate project was collapsing into public humiliation. Bradley Thorne immediately pointed fingers at the floor maintenance technicians, claiming the staff lacked the discipline to operate modern equipment. Sitting quietly at the far end of the table in my worn canvas work jacket, I waited for the noise to subside before offering a clear technical diagnosis. I explained that the vendor units were fundamentally incapable of handling the required deterministic interrupt frequency. The only way to save the project before the upcoming audit by Atlantic Freight Logistics, our largest prospective client, was to bypass the vendor control layer entirely and install a custom high-frequency hardware synchronization bridge. Chief Technology Officer Gordon Miller did not care about system architecture, bus latencies, or thermal dynamics. His sole priority was ensuring that the status indicators on the central monitoring dashboard remained solid green so he could secure his 6-figure annual performance bonus. He leaned over the table, looked me dead in the eye, and told me to do whatever was necessary to stabilize the warehouse floor immediately, provided I did not add a single dollar to the official capital expenditure budget. That restrictive mandate played directly into my long-term strategy. Using materials I had purchased entirely with personal funds under Vance Core Logic LLC, I prepared my proprietary hardware controller for deployment. My absolute crowning achievement was a compact, ultra-rugged hardware control unit designated the Apex Sync Controller version 3.2. The Apex Sync Controller was a triumph of private hardware engineering. Encased in a solid block of anodized black aircraft aluminum about the size of a hardcover book, the unit housed dual redundant processing cores, opto-isolated input-output stages, and a proprietary deterministic execution engine that rendered it completely immune to thermal throttling and signal noise. Long before I ever applied for a position at Apex Logistics Corp., I took rigorous legal precautions to safeguard my invention. Vance Core Logic LLC held the fully registered federal patent for the controller hardware architecture under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271, alongside documented trade secret protections under the Defend Trade Secrets Act. Crucially, when I was originally recruited by Apex Logistics Corp., I insisted on attaching an explicit Schedule A prior invention carve-out to my employment non-disclosure agreement. That legally binding schedule documented every patent, schematic, and prototype owned by Vance Core Logic LLC, legally barring Apex Logistics Corp. From claiming ownership over my pre-existing personal inventions, understanding that the company official vendor modules were fundamentally useless. I brought my personal Apex Sync controllers into the facility inside my heavy canvas work backpack. I was extremely careful with operational boundaries. I did not enter the controller into the corporate inventory database. I did not request a company purchase order, and I refused to submit a single expense receipt for the materials used in its construction. I knew that the moment Apex Logistics Corp. Wrote a corporate check for that physical box, corporate legal would attempt to construct a claim of work-for-hire ownership. Instead, I mounted the black aluminum controller inside Dock Bay 3, wiring it directly into the master distribution rack using custom wiring harnesses I had assembled in my home workshop. I flashed the controller firmware directly from my personal, non-company laptop, ensuring that 0 lines of source code passed through corporate cloud servers. The impact on the warehouse operations was immediate and profound. The instant the Apex Sync controller assumed command of the industrial bus network, the chaotic facility transformed into a quiet, hyper-efficient masterpiece of modern engineering. 90 automated sorting robots moved across the concrete floor in perfect, fluid harmony, picking, scanning, and routing 30,000 packages per hour with 99.8% precision. Cargo containers that previously took 8 hours to unload were processed in under 2 hours, and internal system error rates dropped to literal zero. For 12 straight months, that single black aluminum box mounted quietly in Dock Bay. 3 handled every data packet, sensor pulse, and motor command driving the entire $12 million fulfillment ecosystem. Throughout those 12 months of continuous operation, I maintained a hardbound physical engineering ledger inside my home safe. In that ledger, I meticulously recorded every firmware update, bus calibration change, and diagnostic telemetry reading generated by the controller. I kept complete archival records of every thermal scan, power supply measurement, and signal integrity check. I also documented every single instance where company management ignored my technical warnings or claimed my engineering accomplishments as their own. This physical ledger, signed and dated in blue ink, served as indisputable evidence that the controller was owned, maintained, and operated solely by Vance CoreLogic LLC. 6 months into the controller deployment, a severe summer electrical storm struck the regional industrial park. The storm triggered massive voltage surges across the utility grid, frying power transformers and knocking out several neighboring manufacturing plants. Inside the Apex Logistics Corp warehouse, primary line voltages spiked by over 40%. While the company legacy servers suffered partial power supply failures, my Apex Sync controller absorbed the electrical surge effortlessly. Its internal opto-isolated isolation barriers and metal oxide varistors clamped the voltage spike within nanoseconds, preventing any damage to the downstream robotic pickers. The warehouse floor continued operating without dropping a single data frame. When Gordon Miller asked how the facility survived the storm unscathed, Bradley Thorne casually took credit, telling the CTO that his team had installed superior surge suppression during those 12 months. My daily routine was exhausting but satisfying. I spent my mornings calibrating optical sensors on the main conveyor belts, my afternoons analyzing telemetry logs, and my evenings refining the controller firmware from my home desk. While I worked in the grease and noise of the warehouse floor, Vice President Bradley Thorne and CTO Gordon Miller organized weekly tours for visiting board members, prospective investors, and industry journalists. They walked along the elevated glass catwalks, wearing pristine hard hats and high-visibility vests, pointing down at the gliding robotic fleet and boasting about their revolutionary in-house software architecture. Not once did they invite me to present my work, nor did they ask what was inside the silent, black enclosure, humming softly in Dock Bay 3. To executive management, the controller was just another nameless junction box, as invisible and taken for granted as the concrete foundation beneath their feet. I preferred it that way. Their arrogance was my ultimate strategic shield. However, I was not naive about the corporate world. I knew that once a major infrastructure project reached full operational maturity, executive management routinely sought ways to cut payroll overhead by eliminating senior technical architects. To protect my intellectual property against corporate confiscation, I had embedded a sophisticated cryptographic security layer directly into the core firmware of the Apex Sync controller. This feature, known as an active cryptographic heartbeat protocol, required the controller to establish an encrypted handshake with Vance CoreLogic LLC, secure cloud server every 30 days. If the controller received a signed cryptographic validation key from my home server, it continued to execute its primary control routines at peak efficiency. If the server handshake failed or was manually revoked, the controller was programmed to enter a graceful, multi-stage performance degradation protocol, eventually halting all proprietary logic routines to prevent unauthorized reverse engineering. While maintaining the warehouse floor, I formed a genuine professional bond with a junior DevOps engineer named Toby Cooper. Toby was 26 years old, exceptionally bright, and possessed an infectious enthusiasm for systems architecture. Unlike the middle managers in the executive suite, Toby spent real time on the warehouse floor and possessed a deep respect for practical engineering. One evening, while we were replacing a damaged fiber optic cable near Dock Bay 3, Toby stopped to inspect the black aluminum enclosure housing my controller. He noticed the tiny blue status LED blinking rhythmically behind its sealed acrylic lens, and remarked that if anything ever happened to that specific box, the entire regional fulfillment network would come to a complete standstill within minutes. I smiled quietly, patted Toby on the shoulder, and reminded him that as long as an engineering system is treated with respect and honesty, it will perform its duty. I did not reveal that the box belonged entirely to my private LLC. The long-awaited climax of the automation project arrived on a crisp Thursday morning with the formal operational audit by Atlantic Freight Logistics. Atlantic Freight was a massive international shipping conglomerate, and securing their logistics contract represented an $18 million revenue boost for Apex Logistics Corp. Representatives from the client executive board arrived at the facility in a fleet of black luxury sedans, accompanied by technical auditors and industry consultants. Vice President Bradley Thorne stood on the glass-enclosed viewing gallery, holding a wireless microphone, delivering a rehearsed presentation about how Apex Logistics Corp. Had engineered the premier automated logistics matrix in North America using proprietary internal talent. Down on the warehouse floor, my Apex Sync controller performed flawlessly. 50,000 packages were processed during the 2-hour live demonstration without a single misroute, sensor drop, or mechanical collision. The Atlantic Freight auditors checked their digital stopwatches, inspected the error logs, and openly expressed their amazement at the system responsiveness. The client vice president of global supply chain, a seasoned logistics veteran, asked several pointed questions regarding system latency and failover protocols. Bradley Thorne stuttered through vague answers, prompting me to step forward and provide precise technical metrics regarding bus synchronization and fault tolerance. The auditor nodded in deep approval. Up on the observation deck, champagne bottles were opened, toasts were made, and Gordon Miller enthusiastically shook hands with the client delegation, declaring that a new era of corporate logistics had officially begun. I stood near the primary dock controls, wearing my high-visibility vest and safety glasses, holding a thermal scanner. No one invited me to join the champagne toast, and no executive mentioned my name during the press conference that followed. Following the successful demonstration, the executive team retreated to a celebratory dinner at an exclusive downtown steakhouse, leaving the engineering staff behind to clean up the warehouse floor. I spent 3 hours sweeping debris from the dock lines, wiping down sensor lenses, and running routine diagnostic checks on the controller. I checked my wristwatch and noted the date on my calendar. The 30-day cryptographic heartbeat key running inside the Apex Sync controller was scheduled to expire in exactly 6 days. I knew the corporate culture at Apex Logistics Corp. Far too well to believe my 2 years of hard labor would be rewarded with loyalty. I had seen how management treated line technicians, system administrators, and contract developers once their immediate utility had passed. I was prepared for whatever corporate maneuvering lay ahead, and my legal groundwork was rock solid. The hammer fell on Friday morning at precisely 9 o'clock. My calendar pinged with an unexpected meeting invitation titled Brief HR Alignment Session, scheduled in third-floor conference room B. When I entered the room, I found HR Director Brenda Coleman sitting alongside Vice President Bradley Thorne. Brenda had a practiced, empathetic expression and a thick manila folder resting on the conference table. Bradley Thorne would not look me in the eye. He remained focused on his laptop screen, typing furiously. Brenda cleared her throat, smoothed her jacket, and informed me in a practiced corporate tone that following the successful operational stabilization of the warehouse, executive leadership had decided to restructure the engineering department. Consequently, my position as lead systems integration architect was being eliminated as redundant. Brenda calmly explained that because the automation platform was now deemed self-sustaining, the company was transitioned to a low-cost maintenance agreement with a third-party support group. She added that, Because my role had been classified as project-based technical support, there would be no severance package, despite my 2 years of uninterrupted service. She slid a stack of legal documents across the table, requesting that I sign an immediate release of claims, a comprehensive non-disparagement agreement, and a strict 10-year non-compete covenant barring me from working in the logistics sector. In exchange, the company offered to pay out my remaining 3 days of accrued vacation time. I picked up the documents and read through every single clause with absolute composure. My breathing remained steady, and my hands did not tremble. Brenda Coleman watched me with a tight smile, clearly expecting me to beg for severance or raise my voice in anger. Instead, as I scanned the HR exit checklist, I observed that executive management had committed a massive, fatal blunder. In their haste to eliminate my salary before the start of the new fiscal quarter, they had conducted 0 technical audits, 0 hardware inventory checks, and 0 intellectual property reviews. They simply assumed that every piece of copper, silicon, and steel inside Dock Bay 3 was company property. I quietly placed the non-compete contract back on the table, took out my personal pen, and signed only the basic notice acknowledging receipt of terminations. I looked Bradley Thorne directly in the eye, wished him good luck with the Atlantic Freight contract, packed my personal hand tools into my toolbox, and walked out of the building forever. Upon returning to my suburban home, I did not waste time on anger or frustration. Emotional outbursts are useless in professional conflicts. Victory belongs to those who execute precise legal and technical strategies. I went straight to my private workshop, poured a cup of fresh coffee, and initiated a secure video conference with my longtime intellectual property attorney, Amanda Ross. Amanda was a senior partner at a top-tier patent litigation firm widely recognized for her ruthless defense of independent inventors against corporate IP theft. I presented her with the complete dossier, the original Schedule A prior invention carve-out signed by Apex Logistics Corp. HR, the registered federal patent for the Apex Sync Controller, manufacturing receipts paid by Vance CoreLogic LLC, and system logs proving the hardware had never been transferred or sold to my former employer. Amanda reviewed the documentation with a growing smile. She confirmed that Apex Logistics Corp. was in severe legal jeopardy. By operating their primary commercial warehouse using an unlicensed hardware controller owned exclusively by Vance CoreLogic LLC, the company was committing active patent infringement under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271, while simultaneously violating state trade secret protection statutes. Amanda explained that federal courts take an exceptionally harsh view of willful patent infringement, especially when accompanied by prior contractual carve-outs. To strengthen our position, Amanda immediately prepared a formal court filing certifying our patent documentation and sent a certified courtesy copy directly to the General Counsel of Apex Logistics Corp. Amanda immediately drafted a formal cease and desist demand alongside a binding commercial lease agreement. The terms were uncompromising. Vance CoreLogic LLC offered Apex Logistics Corp. A non-exclusive license to utilize the Apex Sync controller for a fee of $48,000 per month, payable strictly in advance, with 0 transfer of ownership or underlying source code. While Amanda was finalizing the legal paperwork, I opened my personal development environment to monitor the controller remote telemetry. On Monday morning, 3 days after my departure, the Apex Sync controller initiated its monthly cryptographic heartbeat check, pinging my private server for an updated validation key. Because I had disabled the automatic key generation script on my server, the controller received a null response. Exactly as programmed, the controller initiated Phase 1 of its performance degradation protocol. System bus latency increased by 15 milliseconds, sorting arm acceleration parameters were capped, and scanner verification windows were widened. Across the warehouse, sorting throughput dropped by 25%, causing subtle delays in shipping dock operations. By Tuesday afternoon, the operational friction had turned into serious concern. Junior engineer Toby Cooper was tasked with investigating the sudden drop in system performance. Toby ran extensive diagnostic scans on the primary server racks, but every corporate software routine returned normal operating parameters. Puzzled, Toby opened the hardware junction cabinet in Dock Bay 3 to inspect the physical bus architecture. He spotted the black aluminum Apex Sync controller flashing a yellow warning LED. Toby logged into the corporate inventory system to cross-reference serial number VCLAX328, only to find 0 records. There was no purchase order, no asset tag, no user manual, and no software repository associated with the unit anywhere on the company network. Toby immediately reported his discovery to Vice President Bradley Thorne and CTO Gordon Miller. Thorne reacted with explosive anger, asserting that any piece of metal mounted inside their building belonged to Apex Logistics Corp by law. He ordered Toby to attach a commercial hardware diagnostic tool to the controller port and force a raw memory dump to clone its firmware. However, my firmware was protected by advanced hardware security routines. The instant Toby diagnostic probe injected an unauthorized voltage signal into the debugging port, the Apex Sync controller triggered its internal security interlock. It erased its volatile memory buffers, terminated all active bus connections, and entered a state of complete hardware lockout. At 4 minutes past 9 on Wednesday morning, the multi-million-dollar automated fulfillment facility at Apex Logistics Corp. suffered total operational paralysis. Without timing synchronization signals from the Apex Sync controller, 90 automated sorting robots ground to an instant halt on the concrete floor. High-speed conveyor belts stopped moving, optical barcode scanners went dark, and thousands of packages piled up in unmanaged bottlenecks across the facility. Outside the security gates, dozens of heavy shipping trucks backed up along the industrial park roadway, unable to load or unload cargo. A massive shipment bound for Atlantic Freight Logistics sat completely frozen on Dock Line 4. Executive panic swept through the corporate headquarters. Representatives from Atlantic Freight Logistics arrived unannounced for a follow-up inspection, only to walk into a scene of utter chaos as warehouse managers screamed at technicians and alarms blared across the dark facility floor. The Atlantic Freight delegation took careful notes on their clipboards, took photos of the paralyzed machinery, and left the building within 20 minutes. Prominent industry logistics blogs quickly picked up the story, reporting that Apex Logistics Corp. Flagship automated facility had suffered a catastrophic infrastructure failure. CTO Gordon Miller frantically contacted an external industrial automation recovery firm, offering them an exorbitant fee to override the locked controller. The lead consultant took one look at the custom anodized black enclosure, ran a signal continuity test, and informed Miller that the hardware was protected by military-grade encryption. He bluntly told the executive team that attempting to physically tamper with the unit would destroy the internal logic boards beyond repair, leaving the facility permanently offline. At 11 o'clock that morning, attorney Amanda Ross formally served the cease and desist demand and commercial lease agreement to Apex Logistics Corp., Chief Executive Officer, and General Counsel via certified process server and high-priority electronic delivery. Attached to the filing was an official patent infringement notice detailing statutory damages, alongside a digital countdown link indicating that the commercial lease offer would expire in 48 hours. The legal notice made it abundantly clear that any further attempt to reverse engineer or tamper with the property of Vance Core Logic LLC would result in an immediate federal lawsuit seeking triple damages and an emergency court injunction shutting down the entire facility. The company board of directors convened an emergency session at noon. Facing catastrophic financial losses accruing at over $100,000 per hour, and facing the immediate cancellation of the $18 million Atlantic Freight contract, the board conducted a swift internal investigation. The forensic audit revealed that Vice President Bradley Thorne and CTO Gordon Miller had recklessly terminated the lead architect of the entire automation system without verifying equipment ownership or securing intellectual property rights. The board took immediate, ruthless corrective action. CTO Gordon Miller was summarily terminated for gross breach of fiduciary duty and executive incompetence. Bradley Thorne was stripped of all operational authority and escorted from the property by security guards. At 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, my personal phone rang. It was the Chief Executive Officer of Apex Logistics Corp. calling directly. His tone was deeply apologetic, humble, and completely stripped of corporate posturing. He expressed sincere regret for the egregious actions of former management and stated that Apex Logistics Corp was prepared to accept all commercial lease terms drafted by Vance Core Logic LLC without alteration. They agreed to pay the $48,000 monthly hardware licensing fee, backdated to the day of my termination, along with an immediate $150,000 upfront consulting retainer for Vance Core Logic LLC to manage ongoing system architecture. Within 30 minutes, the binding legal contracts were signed, notarized, and transmitted to Amanda Ross, and a wire transfer of $198,000 cleared into the business bank account of Vance Core Logic LLC. Upon receipt of certified bank confirmation, I opened my personal terminal from my home office and transmitted a signed cryptographic activation key to the controller in Dock Bay 3. Within 90 seconds, the yellow status indicator on the black aluminum enclosure transitioned to a solid, brilliant green. Across the vast warehouse floor, mains and circuit breakers engaged, diagnostic screens initialized, and 90 automated pickers resumed their fluid, synchronized motion. Conveyor belts accelerated to full operational speed, optical scanning arrays cleared package backlogs, and the Atlantic freight cargo was loaded into awaiting transport trailers. The entire fulfillment network was fully restored, but the balance of power had permanently transformed. The following Monday morning, I walked back through the front doors of the Apex Logistics Corp facility, not as a vulnerable employee subject to corporate whims, but as the founder and president of Vance Core Logic LLC. I carried my leather briefcase, greeted by respectful staff members and chastened mid-level managers. My new contractor badge granted me unrestricted executive access to all technical bays. As part of my new consulting agreement, I appointed Toby Cooper as the internal lead systems coordinator, ensuring that the junior developer received a substantial salary increase and proper professional mentorship. The warehouse floor technicians welcomed me back with genuine smiles and applause. I walked down to Dock Bay 3, inspected the Apex Sync controller, and confirmed it was operating at 99.9% efficiency. Corporate executives like Bradley Thorne and Gordon Miller believed they could exploit technical genius, steal credit, and discard human beings like disposable tools. They learned the ultimate hard lesson that true power in the modern age does not come from corporate titles or boardroom politics. It belongs to the engineers who design, build, and hold the keys to the machine.